I stood in the back of the room, clutching a lukewarm paper cup of coffee, and watched my older brother, Marcus, toast to new beginnings. He was standing in the middle of our father's living room, a room that used to smell like old books and peppermint, but now smelled like expensive cologne and greed. Marcus was wearing Dad's vintage gold watch, the one he promised would be mine. My sister, Elena, was already labeling the furniture with neon green post-it notes. Sold. Gone. Mine. They didn't see me. To them, I was just the quiet one. The one who stayed behind to change Dad's bandages while they were off, finding themselves in Europe. They thought they had drained every last cent from the estate before the body was even cold. Marcus caught my eye and smirked. He leaned in and whispered, "Don't look so miserable, Leo. We'll leave you the old gardening tools in the shed." That's about your speed, right? I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I just reached into my pocket and felt the small, cold USB drive the estate lawyer had slipped me an hour earlier. The lawyer told me one thing: wait for the reading. Don't say a word until the reading. I looked at Marcus and smiled back. It was a small, thin smile. He didn't know that in 48 hours, his new beginning was going to become his worst nightmare. He didn't know about the file. But he was about to find out. The tension in the house was thick enough to choke you. It's funny how a death brings out the vultures. Dad hadn't been gone for a week, and the locks were already changed. I had to knock on the door of my own childhood home just to get in. Marcus and Elena had moved in like they were conquering a small country. Marcus took the master suite. Elena took the sunroom. I was relegated to the guest room, the one with the leaky faucet and the drafty window. "We have to be practical, Leo," Elena said, not looking up from her iPad as she scrolled through Zillow listings. "The house is too big for you. We need to liquidate." It's what Dad would have wanted. I knew that was a lie. Dad loved this house. He built the back deck with his own hands. He'd spent his final months telling me how he wanted the garden to look in the spring. "And your little art studio in the garage?" Marcus added, pouring himself a glass of Dad's 30-year-old scotch. "That's going to be a home gym. I've already got the equipment arriving on Tuesday." I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed Dad soup every night for 2 years. "The lawyer is coming on Friday," I said quietly. Marcus laughed. "Mr. Henderson? He's 80. He's probably forgotten where he put the will. Besides, we already saw the 2018 draft. Everything split 3 ways, and since I'm the executor, I make the calls on the assets." He patted his pocket, where the house keys jingled. I looked down at my hands. They were stained with charcoal and dirt. Marcus looked at me with such pity, like I was a broken toy. I wondered if they would still be laughing if they knew about the phone call I'd had with Dad 3 nights before he passed. "Leo," Dad had whispered, his voice like dry leaves. "Check the blue folder in the floorboard of the library." Not the safe. The floorboard. I had the folder. And I had the file. The unease in my chest wasn't from fear. It was the heavy, vibrating weight of a secret that was about to explode. To understand why they felt so comfortable stepping on me, you have to understand our childhood. Marcus was the golden boy. He was the star quarterback, the one Dad supposedly bragged about at the hardware store. Elena was the prodigy, the straight-A student who went to an Ivy League school on Dad's hard-earned savings. And then there was me. I was the late mistake. That's what Marcus used to call me when Dad wasn't listening. I was 10 years younger. I liked to paint. I liked to garden. I wasn't productive. I remember one summer, I must have been 7. Marcus and Elena were leaving for camp. Dad was handing them their bags. I reached out for a hug, and Marcus pushed me back so hard I scraped my knees on the driveway. "Stay out of the way, Leo," he'd snapped. Dad hadn't seen it. He was too busy checking the oil in the car for them. As we got older, that gap only widened. When Mom died 10 years ago, Marcus and Elena were already gone. They came for the funeral, cried the loudest, took Mom's jewelry, and vanished back to their lives in the city. I stayed. I was 19. I put my dreams of art school on hold to stay with Dad. He started getting confused. Then he started getting frail. For the last 3 years, it was just us. We grew close in a way the others never could. We spent hours in the garden. He taught me about the soil, about patience, about how things grow in the dark. They have the flash, Leo. Dad told me one night as we sat on the porch. But you have the roots. Never forget that. The roots are what keep the tree standing when the storm hits. I didn't mind the work. I washed his clothes. I managed his medications. I listened to his stories. But every time Marcus or Elena called, which was maybe once every 3 months, they'd talk to him for 5 minutes, promise to visit, and then ask for money. Dad, the firm is struggling, Marcus would whine. Dad, the apartment in Soho is so expensive, Elena would pout. And Dad, being Dad, would send it. He'd look at me after he hung up, his eyes full of a strange kind of sadness. They're hungry, Leo. But they don't know what they're hungry for. About 6 months ago, Marcus came home for a surprise visit. I was so happy I thought he finally wanted to help. But I found him in the library, trying to crack the safe. When I caught him, he didn't even look ashamed. He just said, "I'm making sure Dad isn't being taken advantage of by help like you." He called me the help. In my own father's house. Have you ever felt like a ghost in your own family? Like you were only visible when there was a chore to be done? Tell me in the comments if you've ever been the one who stayed behind while everyone else ran away. That was the day the injustice started to boil. But I stayed silent. Dad needed me calm. He needed me there. But Dad wasn't as confused as they thought he was. He saw the way Marcus looked at the mahogany desk. He saw the way Elena sized up the paintings on the walls. One night, Dad called me into the library. He was sitting in his chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "Leo," he said, "I've been a fool. I thought love could be bought. I thought if I gave them enough, they'd eventually come home for the right reasons." He handed me a key. Not to the safe. To a small, nondescript box at the local bank. "There is a file," he said. "The blue file. If they treat you with respect after I'm gone, you never have to open it. We can all just move on." He gripped my hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "But if they try to take your roots, you open it. You hear me? You open it and you call Henderson." The week after the funeral was a masterclass in cruelty. It started with the inventory. Marcus and Elena sat in the dining room with a professional appraiser. They didn't even wait for the mourning period to end. "That vase? 12,000, Elena said, pointing to a ceramic piece I'd bought Dad for his 60th birthday. "What about Leo's stuff?" the appraiser asked, looking at my charcoal drawings on the wall. Marcus snorted. "Trash. Clear it out by Monday." I stood in the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. "That's my work, Marcus. Dad liked those." "Dad was senile, Leo," Marcus said, not even looking at me. "He probably just didn't want to hurt your feelings. Look, we've been talking. We're going to give you $5,000 as a transition fund. You can find a nice little studio apartment in the city. Maybe get a job at a craft store. $5,000. Dad's estate was worth millions. The house alone was worth 3. "The 2018 will says we split everything," I reminded him, my voice trembling. "The 2018 will was written when Dad thought you were going to be a doctor," Elena chimed in. "Since then, you've basically lived off him like a parasite. We've done the math. The cost of your room and board for the last 10 years? It pretty much cancels out your share." The sheer logic of their greed was staggering. They had convinced themselves that my years of caregiving were actually a debt I owed them. Then came the lockout. I came home from the grocery store on Wednesday to find my suitcases sitting on the porch. The front door was locked. I pounded on the wood. Marcus opened it just a crack. "The appraiser said we need the house empty for the stagers to come in," he said. "You can stay at a motel. We'll deduct it from your $5,000. Marcus, all my art supplies are in there. Dad's journals are in there. They're in the shed, Leo. Move fast. It's supposed to rain." He slammed the door. I sat on the porch steps, surrounded by my life in cheap bags, and watched the clouds roll in. I thought about the night Dad died. I was holding his hand. He hadn't called up for Marcus. He hadn't asked for Elena. He'd whispered, "Don't let them turn the garden into concrete, Leo." I realized then that there was no saving this relationship. There was no family left. There was only the predator and the prey. And they had no idea that the prey had been sharpening his teeth for 3 days. I picked up my bags, walked to the shed, and pulled out the blue folder I'd hidden under a loose floorboard. I sat in my car, the rain drumming on the roof, and finally opened the blue file. I expected a new will. Maybe a secret bank account. But what I found was much, much more powerful than money. Inside were copies of bank transfers. For years, Marcus had been borrowing from Dad's business accounts, not for his firm, but to cover a massive gambling debt in Macau. He'd forged Dad's signature dozens of times. And Elena? There were documents from a private investigator. Dad had found out that the Ivy League degree she bragged about was a sham. She dropped out in her second year, used the tuition money to start a failed luxury lifestyle brand, and had been faking her success ever since, even going so far as to create fake press releases to show Dad. But the biggest thing? The smoking gun? It was a legal document titled Conditional Gift Revocation. Dad had set up a trust years ago. The house, the land, and the bulk of the liquid assets weren't in the will. They were in the trust. And the trust had a conduct clause. If any beneficiary was found to have committed fraud against the grantor, Dad, or if they failed to provide adequate care and presence during the grantor's final illness, their share would be reduced to exactly $1. Underneath the clause was a log. A log Dad had kept, meticulously, for the last 2 years. June 14th, Marcus called. Asked for $50,000. Refused to visit even though I told him I was having surgery. August 22nd, Elena sent an invoice for consulting. Haven't seen her in 8 months. Every day, Leo is here. Leo cooked. Leo stayed up all night when the fever hit. And then a DVD. I popped it into my laptop. It was a video of Dad, sitting in his library, 3 weeks before he passed. He looked tired, but his eyes were sharp. Marcus, Elena, Dad said to the camera. If you're seeing this, it means you've already tried to push Leo out. It means you didn't listen to my warnings. You think you're the smart ones. But you forgot that I built this empire from nothing. You think I didn't see the forgeries? You think I didn't see the lies? He leaned forward. Leo is the only one who actually loved the man. You two just love the bank account. Well, the bank account is closed. I felt a chill run down my spine. That's when I realized that I wasn't just holding a folder. I was holding a detonator. 6. Countdown phase. 5 days before the reading. I booked a room at the local inn. I didn't answer Marcus's texts. I spent the day with Mr. Henderson, the lawyer. Are you sure you want to do it this way, Leo? He asked. They didn't just hurt me, Mr. Henderson, I said. They hurt him. They treated his life like an obstacle. Henderson nodded. Then we follow the script. 3 days before, I saw a for sale sign go up on the lawn of the house. Marcus had listed it for $3.5 million. He was already planning his move to Florida. I watched him from my car as he stood on the porch, talking loudly on his cell phone, probably ordering a new car. I felt a strange sense of calm. I wasn't the weak one anymore. I was the one holding the stopwatch. One day before, Elena called me. Her voice was sweet, like honey over broken glass. Leo, honey, we're having a little celebration of life dinner tonight before the lawyer comes tomorrow. Just us. Family. Why don't you come over? We can talk about that $5,000. Maybe we can make it 7. I knew what they wanted. They wanted me to sign a release of claims before the lawyer showed up. They wanted to make sure I wouldn't sue. I'll be there, I said. The night before, the dinner. I walked into the house. They had rearranged everything. My paintings were gone. The house felt cold. Marcus and Elena were drinking wine. They had a catered meal on the table. To Dad, Marcus said, raising his glass. To Dad, I said, taking a sip of water. So, Leo, Elena said, leaning in. We have some papers for you to look at. Just some boring legal stuff to protect all of us. If you sign them tonight, Marcus can wire you $10,000 right now. Think of what that could do for your art. I looked at the papers. It was a total waiver of rights. I think I'll wait until the lawyer opens the file tomorrow, I said quietly. Marcus's face darkened. Don't be difficult, Leo. You're lucky we're giving you anything. Tomorrow is just a formality. Why wait? Because, I said, standing up. I like formalities. See you at 10. I walked out. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I kept thinking about the moment the lawyer would open the file. I kept thinking about Dad's voice. Have you ever had to sit through a dinner with people who were plotting against you? How did you keep your cool? The library was packed. Marcus and Elena had brought their own lawyers, two guys in sharp suits who looked like they were ready to eat Mr. Henderson for lunch. They were sitting at the big mahogany desk like they already owned it. "Let's get this over with," Marcus said, checking his gold watch, Dad's watch. "I have a flight to catch at 3. Mr. Henderson walked in, carrying a single, worn leather briefcase. He looked every bit of his 80 years, but when he sat down, he didn't look tired. He looked like a judge. "Before we begin the reading of the 2018 will," Henderson said, "I have been instructed to present a supplemental file. The blue file, as Mr. Sterling called it." Marcus laughed. "What is this? Some kind of joke? There are no supplements. We have the will right here." "Actually, Mr. Marcus," Henderson said, peering over his glasses, "the will you are holding is subject to the terms of the Sterling Family Trust. A trust you were never given access to. Until today." He pulled out the USB drive. "Leo, if you would?" I stood up. My hands were steady. I took the drive and plugged it into the large monitor Dad used for his stock charts. "What is this, Leo?" Elena hissed. "Sit down." I didn't sit down. I hit play. Dad's face filled the screen. The room went silent. I mean, dead silent. As Dad started talking about the hunger of his older children, Marcus's face went from smug to pale. When Dad mentioned the Macau gambling debts and the forged signatures, Marcus's lawyer actually took a step back, away from his client. "This is a fake," Marcus yelled, slamming his hand on the desk. "He was senile. Leo, you manipulated him." "The medical records are also in the file, Marcus," I said, my voice projecting through the room. "He was cleared by 3 different neurologists the day this was filmed. He knew exactly what he was doing." Elena was shaking. "Dad wouldn't do this. He loved us." "He did love you," I said. "That's why it hurt him so much to watch you wait for him to die." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and began to read from the conditional gift revocation. "Due to documented financial fraud and a failure to meet the caregiving requirements established in Section 4 of the trust," Henderson read, "the shares of Marcus Sterling and Elena Sterling are hereby revoked." "You can't do that," Marcus's lawyer shouted. "The trust is ironclad," Henderson replied calmly. "And the evidence of the fraud is already being prepared for the district attorney. Unless, of course, the beneficiaries choose to waive their interest and vacate the properties immediately." The power shift was physical. Marcus looked like he was shrinking in his chair. Elena started to cry, but it wasn't a sad cry. It was the cry of someone who just realized the ATM was broken. "The house," Henderson continued, "along with the remaining $14 million in liquid assets, the investment portfolio, and all personal property, is bequeathed in its entirety to the sole remaining beneficiary who met the conditions of the trust." He looked at me. "Leo Sterling." Marcus stood up, his face purple. "You think you're going to keep this? I'll see you until you're 90. You're a nothing. You're a gardener. You're a charity case." "Actually, Marcus," I said, walking over to him, "I'm the landlord. And you're trespassing." I looked at his wrist. "And I'll take the watch. It was a gift from Mom to Dad." "You didn't even know that, did you? You just saw 18-karat gold." I reached out my hand. Marcus looked at his lawyers. They both looked at the floor. They knew a lost cause when they saw one. Slowly, with his hands shaking, Marcus unbuckled the watch and dropped it into my palm. "You have 2 hours to get your things," I said. "The stagers you hired? I've already canceled them. And the home gym equipment? I've redirected the delivery back to the warehouse." "Leo, please," Elena sobbed. "I have debts. I have people I owe." "Then I suggest you find a job, Elena," I said. "Maybe at a craft store. I hear they're hiring." Watching them leave was the strangest feeling in the world. There was no big victory music. It was just the sound of 2 people dragging suitcases across a gravel driveway in the rain. Marcus didn't look back. He was already on his phone, probably calling someone to beg for a loan. Elena was wailing into a handkerchief. Within an hour, the house was silent. The vultures were gone. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was massive. Marcus had to sell his firm to avoid being prosecuted for the money he'd stolen from Dad's accounts. I decided not to press charges on the condition that he never contact me again. It was a small price to pay for peace. Elena moved into a small apartment and, for the first time in her life, actually had to work. I heard she's a receptionist now. People asked me if I felt guilty. They asked how I could take everything from my own siblings. But I didn't take it. They threw it away. They traded a father's love for a chance at a bank account, and they lost both. I spent the first month just cleaning. I took down the neon green post-it notes. I moved my art supplies back into the garage. I went into the library and sat in Dad's chair. I realized that the everything they took from me wasn't the house or the money. It was the belief that I had a family who cared. But Dad gave that back to me. He showed me that he saw me. He showed me that being the one who stayed meant something. The garden is blooming now. It's spring, and the peonies Dad loved so much are heavy with color. I'm sitting on the back deck, the one he built. I have a sketchbook in my lap. For the first time in 10 years, I'm not painting because I'm sad. I'm painting because I'm free. I sold some of the more expensive paintings Marcus wanted to auction, but I didn't keep the money. I started a foundation for young artists who have to put their dreams on hold to care for sick family members. I want to make sure no one else feels like the help while they're doing the most important work of their lives. I still miss Dad every day. I miss his peppermint smell and his stories about the soil. But when I walk through the house now, it doesn't feel like a museum of what I lost. It feels like a home. The roots are deep. The tree is standing. And the storm has finally passed. Sometimes, the quiet ones aren't quiet because they have nothing to say. We're quiet because we're listening. We're watching. And we're waiting for the right moment to open the file. If you're going through something like this, if you feel overlooked or taken advantage of, just remember, your value isn't defined by how loudly you speak. It's defined by the truth you hold. Thanks for listening to my story. It's a hard one to tell, but if it helps even one person stand their ground, it was worth it. See you in the garden.